Good afternoon, short-term shoppers. You are now in the Short-Term Show special episode series on the Western North Carolina mountains. So this is everywhere from Asheville all the way down to Bryson City, basically that entire southwestern corner of the state. We're going to be doing a deep dive, 10 episodes worth of content on investing in this part of North Carolina. Now, we do have some supplemental materials for you over on our website, things like purchase prices of investment properties in this market, as well as the AirDNA income data. Thank you, friends over at AirDNA. So if you guys want to know what all of these properties cost, the different purchase prices, you can see that on theshorttermshop.com, as well as the income data. You can find that there too. If you guys want to buy an investment property in Western North Carolina with a short-term shop agent, email us at agents@theshorttermshop.com and we will get you hooked up. Or if you just have more questions, you want to come hang out with us some more, we've got a great Facebook group with a wonderful community of investors over at Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth, same title as my book. And if you guys want to chat with us live anytime, we've got a call every Thursday, and you can join that at strquestions.com. We look forward to seeing you over there. Hey guys, welcome back to the next episode in the Short-Term Shop special episode series of the Western North Carolina mountains. Got some familiar faces here. Jay, the short-term shop agent in that market, and Brad, who owns in more short-term shop markets than any other person. So how's it going today, guys?
Very good, Avery.
Awesome. So today we are talking about common expenses. So in another episode, we've talked about analysis and figuring out what the income of a property will be. So today we're focusing on what our expenses are going to be. This isn't too crazy of a market in terms of weird expenses that are going to jump up and bite you, but we are going to go over all of them. So let's get started. So I'll start with the first expense that I always think of. I think the most important expense is probably going to be your electric, because a lot of times it can run your fireplace. You can't run without electric. So I know in some markets, especially with cabin style properties, these aren't typically energy efficient places. So it's not a super low electricity area, I would imagine. But what do you guys say?
Yeah, electricity is very important. They do run a lot of the side stuff, but up here, mostly the side stuff is like propane ran. But, the average electric bill up here, as far in my area, at least, is about $120 a month. And that just depends on what you use. I mean, if you're using a short-term rental, it's probably going to be less than somebody that uses it full time. The electric companies up here that I work with, that we have to work with, are Duke Energy and Haywood EMC. And they're if you really want to know what the average monthly is on a property that you're looking at, you can call them up and they are more than happy to give you that monthly bill, like what the monthly average is. I'm sure it looks pretty similar out in Murphy too, huh, Brad?
Yeah, it's maybe just slightly higher. I have a fairly small cabin and it's newer construction, so that probably helps. But I keep my hot tub on all the time, whether I have a guest there or not. I keep it at 104, and I don't try to necessarily conserve electricity. So I'm typically in the high 100s every month. 160 to 190 typically. It may have been 200 once, maybe in the summertime when it's super hot, but it's typically in the high 100s. So from a kilowatt or however they measure that, it's fairly inexpensive relative to other markets, just like the rest of the Southeast.
Yeah. And we're fortunate up here that, like, if you don't have an AC, it's not really going to kill you, because it doesn't usually get above 85 here in the summertime, except for last year. That was a fluke, but usually you don't need that.
Yeah.
Okay. So electric, pretty straightforward. It's usually pretty straightforward in all the markets. So let's talk about water and sewer. So I would imagine it's going to be a mix of places on city or county water and sewer, and then places that are on wells and septics. Jay, what, in your experience, if you're like out, we're not talking about Asheville proper, which would be, inside the major city limits. But would you say that the majority of properties are on wells and septics, and that the inside city limits is a lower percentage?
Yeah, and it's kind of shocking, but about 70% of places in this market are on well and septic. So unless you're, like you said, in the major city or whatnot, they also have the luxury of getting like trash pickup too. So you don't get that out here in the rural areas either. But more times than not, when you look at a property, it's going to be well and septic. I actually did a search for somebody the other day, like they didn't want anything on septic, and came up with like 4 properties that didn't have well and septic. So yeah, it's very common up here.
Same in Murphy. It's I don't know the percentages, but everyone around me, we actually have a shared well, which is an interesting concept, but we have 5 cabins that all share the same well, and there's one pump for that. And you basically have easements that you have access to that well, and then we share the electric cost, which is not expensive. It's we actually do that on a semi-annual basis. It's around $20 a month to run the well, and then you of course have the install cost of the well built into your cost of construction. But then you don't have I don't have a water bill every month, so except for that electricity. So it's if you average it out over a longer period of time, I would say it probably averages out to about the same as what it would be if I was on a sewer or city water.
Yeah, and that's actually very common up here too, Brad. There's a lot of places that were built a long time ago that when they built them, they put them on a shared well, and that's a whole other bag of cats when you're selling or buying a house, like trying to find that easement and everything, and making sure everything's kosher. But usually there's one person that handles it, and you pay a due like you would a road maintenance agreement. So
yeah, it's on one of the cabin's lots, and we just pay it to that lady, and the agreement is signed at closing, and it's been fine. I haven't had any issues at all with that.
The only downfall for a well is if you lose power, you lose water too. So. Correct. Unless you have a generator. So
that's correct.
Yeah. And I've got some properties on shared wells too. And a lot of investors get really worried about that, but I've never had a problem. And it really is, well, I do have a problem. I have an ongoing problem that is just not a problem to me because I don't care. So here's something that you can run into with a shared well. Typically there's 2 to 5 cabins on a shared well. And if something goes wrong with it, everyone's sharing in the cost of fixing it. Everyone's sharing in the cost of the electric for it too. So the pump is actually on my property, and we have a separate meter for that. So we know what to bill everyone. And there's 3 people on ours. One guy is awesome about just sending every month. We don't have to worry about it. Sometimes it's every month, sometimes it's every year. It just depends on what your shared well. There should be a shared well agreement. It should not be a handshake. The other guy who's next door to me, he lives there full time. He is I don't really know a word to use for him other than, he's an interesting character that is not often employed, if ever. And he refuses to pay for water. And the guy who owned the cabin before me said he cut his water off one time. Like, he went to the trouble of turning off the valve, and the guy actually came over and broke into his crawl space and turned his water back on. So I don't really care. I'd rather stay on good terms with the next door neighbor, and he can do his thing. I'll do my thing. We're not going to get in each other's business. Kind of sucks that you're not paying your water bill, but it's not really enough for me to have to worry about. And I don't want to get sideways with him. So hopefully he doesn't listen to this podcast. I doubt he will. But anyway, so that's the kind of thing that it can happen. If I wanted to run that down, I could, but it's just not enough money to want to deal with it. So, he's happy. I'm happy. He's got free water. So, but yeah, I think that's the worst that can happen. And it's not that bad.
Avery, something popped into my head that is an abnormal, I would call it abnormal, that you're not used to if you are on city water, is that you have a water filter at the cabin. And I learned that the hard way one time with a guest, that they had brown water coming out of their, the first cabin that I owned. I didn't realize it had a water filter. So I learned that the hard way with one guest, but I obviously haven't forgotten it since. But it needs to be on a routine maintenance, typically every 4 to 6 months. I have mine on every 6 months, and that's more than frequent enough. But it's a minimal cost in that regard, but it's more the pain of just having to remember it, or have your cleaner remember it, or your handyman or whoever to remember it. It needs to be a scheduled thing, just like your air filters and anything else you would change on an ongoing basis, batteries and all that. We try to put all that on the same, it's like every other rotation that you have to do the water filter. So it's not as frequent, but you still have to remember it. Otherwise, you'll, about 8 or 9 months in, if you forget, you'll be reminded, because your guests will have brown water coming out of their shower. So it's just one of the more thing to remember, but it's like $30, I think, or $25. You can buy them on Amazon. Easy. We buy 6 at a time, put them in the owner's closet, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah. And Brad, right before you said that, I was fixing this. I recommend, if you're on a shared well like that, the well itself will have a filter usually, but I would always recommend putting a filter on your end by where it comes into your house, because you don't have any idea how old that filter system is on there. And you want nice, clean water without Giardia going into these places.
Yeah. It's usually by the hot water heater in the mechanical closet somewhere mounted on a wall. It's very small, clear plastic.
Yeah, just change it every so often.
Just change it. Don't
let that water get brown.
Yeah. And that's usually like a filter thing. So a lot of times people are like, oh my God, my well's broken. Because either the water's brown or the water pressure is low. And a lot of times the water pressure is low because the filter's dirty and you just need to change it. So it's not going to be some big, huge expense. It's going to be $50. No big deal. Some wells are filters. Some wells are salt filters. So the cartridge filters, you just get one and change it out. Your handyman will do that. Well filters, salt filters, you actually pour salt down there. So, either way, it's maybe $50 a month, if that. Like, it won't be every month. So you don't need to budget that much, but just, something to think about with wells.
Yeah, and kind of segueing off of that too, with septics, you're going to have them pumped every so often. It's like every 3 to 4 years, you'll want to have it pumped. I don't have any exact figures on that right now, but that is an expense that you will look at for.
I just had mine done. It was about $1,800. So
there you go.
Average that out.
That's expensive.
Yeah, it's a fairly big tank. So it was. It had been like 4.5 years. So that's how many months? That's 50-ish months. So $30 a month.
It was probably pretty full. And it also depends on location too. I think, getting those trucks up to in like a really high area, they might charge a little more for that.
Yeah, and the location of the tank too. If it's easy for them to just open it up and drop it in, it's going to be cheaper than if they have to dig it up.
That means it's been used a lot. I'm fine cleaning it out.
Or rappel on the side of a mountain.
People have been there.
So that was the other thing the next thing I was going to talk about too is septic. So there's really not a monthly maintenance charge for that. It's just making sure that you keep it pumped. I do them once a year just to be super safe. But yeah, what's normal is like 3-ish years, but we do once a year.
And you're probably going to pump it a whole lot less having it as a short-term rental opposed to having, a dedicated family in there the whole time using the toilets, so there's going to be like, uptime between toilet use in there. So it's not going to fill up as quick.
All right. So I think that's enough on wells and septic. So let's talk about internet. I know there's probably some places in these areas that are not going to be serviced by your typical like AT&T, things like that. So what are we looking at for internet?
The big one up here in my area is, if you're close to the lines, is Spectrum. And, your basic internet package for internet, is about $50. It could vary slightly depending on how fast you want your internet, or if you want to add other things onto it. But the basic internet service across the board for most ISPs are about $50. And we do have a local ISP up here that was bought out by Zito Media, and that kind of feeds they do Maggie Valley and the Jonathan Creek area up here. They're hit or miss on, like, because their lines are weird. Like, you could have internet, but your next door neighbor's not on the line, so they don't get it. So it was originally started as kind of like a local business, but then was bought out. And they're similar too. They're about $50, and they're actually really good internet service if you can get them. I never had any problems with them when I lived over that way. But your higher up cabins, you're gonna have to find creative solutions on internet, and that's where like the Verizon or the AT&T kind of internet comes into play, or satellite internet. It's, no internet is not as good as having internet. So you find a way to get it there.
Yeah. On mine, it's mostly satellite. I do have one that's on fiber. Naturally, if you can be on fiber, you would want that to happen if you can.
Absolutely.
If you can search, if you're starting your search and you want to start by filtering out the ones that are on fiber and not on, I would definitely lean towards one that's on fiber. However,
it's a little bit more expensive.
Fiber, it is a little more expensive, but You have very little, if any, interruptions, and it's typically significantly faster and unlimited. The big thing about satellite internet is that there's data caps on it typically. So if I try to offset that by providing TV service on the ones that have satellite internet, I typically opt to have Dish or some kind of TV service, so they don't feel like the guests don't have to stream everything, which will just burn through your data cap. So I typically lean towards the higher end of the spectrum, not just to say that you have it, but because if I were at that cabin, I would want the fastest internet there too. So I try to think of what the guests would want to think. And you're talking a difference of 20 to 40 bucks a month to go up to the higher speed internet. So it's probably worth it. So usually as you're further out, as Jay said, it's going to be satellite. I have something called HughesNet at mine.
HughesNet, yeah.
It's not great, but we also deflect that in our listing by saying, hey, you're coming to the mountains, service can be spotty, and don't expect to be streaming 17 devices and be on 5 Zoom calls all at the same time, like you probably can in your place in Atlanta or wherever you are. So I think if you set that expectation, kind of like you do with driveways and the other things, it helps deflect some of the negative feedback, but it's definitely best to have something over nothing for sure.
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. And honestly, when people come up here to visit, I mean, they're not coming into the mountains to like game online or stream. A lot of times people just want to check their email or browse the internet at night. And that's all very basic like usage. I'm a tech guy, so I need like 3 terabytes down. Let's go. But yeah, it's not a huge deal up here. People are up here playing and then not staying in their house usually.
I did not spring for the TV service at first, and I got a lot of negative reviews from that. So I think that's one way to help offset it. If you are willing to pay the $90 a month for Dish, that definitely helps. It's probably the best $90 a month I spend, because they don't have to stream as much.
Yeah, folks want to watch something at night, or the game or something, but
they'll find it on Dish, and they're not having to stream it on YouTube, which, that definitely helps offset the data usage for sure.
Absolutely. Roku is very popular up here too.
All right. And is Starlink available up there yet?
I don't think so.
Not for Murphy. I put in my request for Murphy, and I haven't received it or gotten approved for it yet. And that was 7 months ago, probably. So I have heard that you can get an RV version of it, and it will, you can set up the RV version. Even though you're not in an RV, you can still use the RV version. So I haven't tried that, but if I start having issues with HughesNet, I will probably at least attempt it, see what it looks like.
Yeah, I need to get on the list for the RV version too, because we've got on ours basically like a kind of cell phone hotspot version of something else, another brand. And if you get in this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but if you get in a big campground, like a big KOA that has like 200 slots, then at nighttime, like you cannot stream anything because there's just too many people on there. And I need to be able to stream things because my kids start to lose their minds at nighttime. They want to like
and then you
horse around. Yeah. And then I lose it. Yeah. So
I admit that. I'll keep an eye on that, but I haven't heard anything about Starlink coming to my area. Brad's a little farther out there in Murphy, so if that would be actually better, because one of your really only options out there is HughesNet. So
that's right.
All right, good to know. So let's move on to something else. So cleaning fees, Brad, what do you pay in a cleaning fee? How many bedrooms is yours again?
It's a 2-bedroom. It's 1,200 square feet or so, 1,300 square feet. So I pay $130 per cleaning.
Okay.
So, that we checked with several different cleaners, and it ranged from 110 to 150. So, I'm one of those that just passes along the cleaning fee to the guest. I don't upcharge typically. So, we just charge the guest 130, and I've never had any complaints ever at that market. It's completely reasonable.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I was gonna,
that's pretty good baseline.
Yeah. I was gonna say, and over here it's about average, about 150 per, give or take in that area.
So what is included in the cleaning fee? Do the cleaners take the trash in this market, or do you have to figure that out yourself?
You have to pay for a separate trash service, and it's 40-ish bucks a month. It's about $5 per pickup. So they pick up twice a week. And one key thing that is in all these markets, in Blue Ridge and Murphy and Boone and all of them, it has to be bagged trash. So if it's not bagged, they will not pick it up, because the cleaning company gets, or the trash company gets charged if a piece of trash flies out of their truck. So I've had a couple of times where guests would just like dump their cup holders from their car into the trash can, and the trash guys will literally drive by it and just say, sorry. So you have to coach your cleaner on, will you please look in the trash can before you leave? Keep some trash, but I'll keep some trash bags in the owner's closet. Will you just pick up the 5 Starbucks cups or whatever it is that's in the trash can and put them in there and make sure that it's bagged? Very rarely do I have a problem, but I had to learn the hard way on that too, on the front end. So everything else is included in that. In the 130, mine actually services the hot tub with that. If I supply the chlorine or the little tablets, so I just have the local spa company they have my credit card on file, and when the cleaner needs stuff, they go and buy it like 6 months at a time. And they will fill it. They'll turn the water on to fill it while they're cleaning, and it's not a big deal. So that's included. Some markets are not that way, but it is included in Murphy.
Yeah, and that's the problem up here in the mountains too. That we don't. There's a lot of places that don't have city pickup, but there's like trash receptacles conveniently located throughout the cities up here. If you are close enough to one, you might be able to get your cleaner to just drop it off on their way out. I know over on Jonathan Creek, there's a drop off right there, and it's not been a problem. So, but yeah, that's another expense. Good point, Brad. And you might have to pay somebody to do trash pickup, but it's not horribly expensive.
So what else is included in that cleaning fee? Are your cleaners supplying your paper products, or are you having to Amazon those?
I have chosen to supply my own because I wasn't happy with what they were supplying. They were willing to supply, but it was so minimal that it was just not a good experience for the guests. So I've actually chosen to supply that. So we ship it in. Sometimes I take it because it's only an hour and a half from my house. So sometimes if I'm going to put eyeballs on the property, I will just take it. We do have them report to us once a month what the supplies are looking like. So we know if shampoo or whatever is running out. So we have the little try the 3-pack thing that has shampoo, body wash,
conditioner.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we buy it at Costco or Sam's and just have them refill it to the top at every cleaning. So we're supplying that. They supply, or they bring their own cleaning supplies like a vacuum and a mop and Clorox and whatever else. I don't have to supply that. But anything for that, we do dish pods and salt and pepper in the kitchen and just minimal things that we buy all that at either Costco or Sam's and just take it every 4 to 5 months and stock the owner's closet.
And this is something that's negotiated up front too when you get with your cleaner. I mean, some of them will supply it, and if you're okay with what they supply, then costs may vary, but sometimes you have to supply the stuff.
Gotcha. And so, Brad, if you're paying 130, was it more when they were supplying, or has the price stayed the same? Okay.
Yeah, we started they gave us the option of 150 and them supply everything, or 130 and us supply it. And I chose the math works out about the same, but the quality of the products is significantly different. So gotcha. I want there to be some consistency. And I just try to think of how the guest would think. Like if I was going to stay in there, I don't want a little cardboard bar of soap to be provided to me. Like it's pointless. Like why do you even, I'd rather just not be there than to supply it and say we supply it. So I don't have to be, in a spa environment, but you at least want it to be usable and something that is reasonable. So yeah. It just makes sense to me to have that and it's not a pain. I mean, it's not difficult to supply that. It's pretty easy.
My cleaner actually has a no bar soap rule for her owners who are supplying their own. She was like, yep. She told us at the beginning, I do not want to have to clean up bars of soap that have been up people's butts, is what she said. Yep. And I have to say, I agree. So
that's why we do that's why we do that inside the shower. We do the body wash, shampoo, and conditioner inside the shower, and it's easy.
Yeah. And the mountains, there's up here especially, we're very crafty and like artsy and stuff. So you can find some people that make these things, and that kind of can put a flare on your cabin and stuff, like mountain laurel soap or something, and you can get those pretty inexpensive.
All right. So gone through cleaning, gone through hot tubs. So hot tubs is included in the cleaning. That's cool because nobody wants to have to find an extra vendor to do that. Let's talk about pest control. So there are probably a few specific types of pests, I would guess carpenter bees that you kind of have to treat against. So what are we looking at for pest control?
So I have a monthly service. It's $40 a month, and it's the typical, spray for bugs. And then you have the carpenter bee service is an additional service that I think is it's either every 3 or 6. I can't remember, but
they are killer too.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, if you actually have a true wood cabin, they will destroy your cabin and very quickly. So it's definitely worth it. It may be every 3 months, but that I think is like $90 every 3 months or every 6 months. So again, it's not going to break the bank, but it's definitely something that you have to stay on top of and have there. As far as other pests or rodents, it's just like anywhere else. You may have some mice every once in a while, and like at the beach, you have these cockroaches that look like they're
and they fly.
They're like the size of mice, and so
meadow bugs.
There's not a lot of that. This is kind of in that lane, but you do need to have some kind of secured trash can for bear-proof trash cans.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't had any issues. A lot of people have had those issues, but I haven't had those issues. But it definitely is a threat or a problem that you can't do anything about that with pest control. But it's a piece of that trash can is twice the cost of another trash can. So you're always going to get surprised with 200 here and 150 there, but it's nothing that is a big deal. They show up once a month. They bill me quarterly, so I just get charged on my credit card $120 every 3 months, and that's it. Yeah. I've never had any issues.
Yeah, average pest control up here is, depending on the size of your house and stuff, it's anywhere from between $400 and $950 a year. So, and then a good point on the bear one, and we'll probably go over that in a little bit greater detail in another podcast, but that is definitely a thing up here, especially on my side over here. Bears are all over the place. And, I've seen lately a lot of people putting up carpenter bee traps too. So it's like a trap that the carpenter bee goes in and then it gets stuck at the bottom. But those little things will destroy your house like really quick. And they look like bumblebees. So it's hard to tell. Mm-hmm. They can't sting you though. That's a good thing. They don't have a stinger.
Yeah. Oh, dude. We were at this little country buffet place out in rural South Alabama. We were looking for a little farm to kind of get away to in the summertime from here. And we were outside and it was all old people. And Max, my 4-year-old, was standing there just kind of minding her business. We were outside on the porch and this old lady walked by and there was a carpenter bee buzzing around. And she told Max, she was like, "Oh, you need to watch out. That bee's going to sting you." And Max was like, "We got to work on not correcting elders." And she was like, "Actually, they won't." And the lady was like, "Yes, they will. Bees will sting you." She was like, "That's a carpenter bee and they don't sting." And I'm like, "All right, get out of here. Just say yes, ma'am to her and stop."
They look so similar to bumblebees, which can sting you, but they're really docile. Those are.
Yeah. All right. So while we're talking about, pest control and stuff, let's hit on maintenance. So what, Brad, do you budget for your maintenance monthly on these things?
Well, I have mostly new construction, so mine's probably less than the average if you're buying an older cabin, but I've typically budgeted $100 to $150 a month. So like $1,500 a year. Some of that is trimming bushes and keeping, we have a lot of weeds and things that grow in the spring and summertime around the house. So I like to keep it clean and keep it really clean cut. So I have it sprayed twice a year at the beginning, like about this time. They're actually doing it this upcoming week. And then about halfway through the summer to keep all the weeds around the fire pit and all the things outside. Just to keep it presentable and looking good. So mine's more of a presentation for maintenance because I'm new construction usually. But I would say that it's not anything that is going to be detrimental to your cash flow for maintenance. Even on the older cabins, things just don't cost a lot in the Southeast. So, even HVAC maintenance and things like that, it's a couple $100 at a time. So you're typically not having large expenses. Another thing about buying new construction, another reason why I lean towards it, is because you typically have a builder's warranty for 12 months after you purchase. So if there are those things that are not related to people just wearing the cabin down or breaking things, then they're going to get fixed in the first 12 months. So I have a rule that 9 months into the purchase, if it was a brand new construction, that we go through and like almost do a home inspection again, and look at it with a fine tooth comb and see if there's anything that's missing or messed up or could potentially mess up really soon. So I would encourage everyone else to do that too. If you're buying new construction, just go ahead and do that right before the warranty runs out, and in a reasonable amount of time to give them time to fix it before the 12 months. Don't do it at 11 months and 28 days, and be a jerk. But if you'll do it 9 or 10 months in, that usually the builder will work with you and fix stuff. Yeah,
it's one thing I always stress up here. Don't do it last minute. Get on the radar as soon as you can, because you want to meet deadlines. So don't last minute up here.
That's right. Yeah, it will not go well.
No, not at all.
So what are we looking at for insurance in this market? I would imagine it's pretty affordable compared to like a beach market. So Brad, do you know what you're paying in insurance a month?
Yeah. It actually hit my Amex this morning. Actually, I was looking at something. So it's $140 a month, 144. So
for a 2-bed.
1,600 a year. That's about right. I add in an umbrella policy on top of that, an extra $1 million of liability on top of that. So it's probably, the actual policy is probably like 110 or $120 a month. So 1,300, 1,400. You don't have to have any flood or anything else that's, weird or extra expense. So it's just a homeowner's policy that is designed for short-term rental. In North Carolina, I use State Farm. They're normally not a great short-term rental company, but in the Southeast, in Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, and Alabama, they're actually really good. So if you own in the Southeast, their rates in the Southeast are really competitive. They're actually better than anybody else that I've looked at. So
awesome. So you're using them for your umbrella. Who are you using for your STR insurance?
I have State Farm for all of it. They have STR. Yeah, they have STR policies now. They used to not allow you to do that if you're self-managing. They used to exclude that, but now I think they realized that they were missing a massive piece of the pie. So they changed that about 2 years ago. So you used to have a professionally managed a management company doing it to qualify with State Farm, and you don't anymore. And you get I have my primary stuff is with State Farm too, so that my multi-policy discount extends to my STR.
That's smart.
That's awesome.
Up here, if you do have a place in a floodplain, they do require you to have flood insurance up here. Just FYI, but you have to be in a floodplain. We have floodplains up here. We do, but they're because we have rivers and stuff. Big rivers.
Yeah.
Like 2 or 3 years ago, we had a huge rain that came in and just destroyed a bunch of stuff in Canton. At the time, Canton was still stinky, so it really didn't matter. But for us as short-term rental investors, but there's a lot of problems that it caused, and over time they've kind of built it up to where it can withstand these floods. But there are certainly low areas. If you're in like a valley and there's a river nearby, there are floodplains up here. They're just not all over the place.
Good to know. So let's move on to taxes. So property taxes, what are we looking at?
Go ahead, Brad. It's about 0.6% is kind of average on property tax, 0.6 purchase or assessed value. Anyway, is that about right for what you're paying over there, Brad?
Same. Yeah, it's about 0.5%, half of 1%. So the property taxes are really inexpensive. They obviously make their money on the hotel and other tax. So, and that too is also reasonable because it's not a huge market yet. So, I'm sure that will creep up over time, but right now that's about, I think it's 6 or 6.25%, which is also reasonable. So,
and the assessed value in a market like this is typically quite a bit less than what the actual purchase price is, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and they just assessed recently, and typically I haven't seen them assess every year. It's every few years is when they assess. I mean, it can, I guess I see them doing it again just because, coming out of COVID and stuff like that, obviously things have changed quite dramatically, but we just assessed like a year or so ago. So,
Okay.
I find it's usually like 60 to 70% of the sales price is what the assessed value will be normally.
All right.
yeah.
I paid 289 and my assessed value was like 170, I think, or 175, something like that. So that means my property taxes are like $800, 850.
Yeah. Property tax up here is, I mean, even if you have a giant house, I mean, it's very reasonable. Like, it's definitely not the highest in the country. So,
Yeah.
For sure.
So what are we looking at for the taxes that we have to pay on our booking? So like the state sales tax and the occupancy tax.
you got your occupancy tax up here, and it looks consistently across the board is about 4%. Your local taxes can be anywhere from 2 to 2.75%. What are you kind of seeing on yours, Brad?
Yeah, it's I looked at it this morning to prep for this, and it's just over 6%, it's like 6.25. So that's about the same as you, Jay. And the regulation is very minimal in Murphy. I mean, very, very minimal. It's hardly anything. So we had to just notify them that we have a cabin that's being used for STR, and that was it. I mean, no inspections or like safety inspections or anything like that. None of that.
No business licenses up here. I mean,
nope.
you buy and list. That's pretty much how you do it up here. And if you use Airbnb and Vrbo, like they do most of the tax stuff for you. So,
there's nothing outside of what Airbnb does that I have to do in this market. There's nothing else. Super easy.
If you did it without Airbnb or Vrbo or a platform like that, you would then have to register at the tax office to do it yourself. But like I said, since they do it, you don't have to do anything. So it's great state for regulations because we don't have any really.
Yep,
it's awesome.
Awesome. And did we hit occupancy tax? How much is that? 4%.
4%. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. What else? Anything else? So we've gone over insurance, taxes, like the utilities of the house, maintenance, anything else that might be a common expense that we haven't hit? Oh, maybe propane for fireplaces.
Yeah. Propane, it's very common up here. Sometimes you'll still see stuff on kerosene. I know one of my properties actually still has a kerosene heating system, and I have a tank for that. But, I have to go down the road, fill up tanks and bring them back up and fill it up, which is not practical. But your average cost of propane up here, and that's the most of your fire logs and your outside heating or your fire pit, your electric or propane fire pits, that they're going to use a propane tank that's on the property there. And you'll either rent that tank or you have your own that they just come and drop propane for you. So propane is actually coming down quite a bit. It is about $3.30 a gallon right now. And, we're down from $3.50 this time last year. So it's not coming down like crazy quick, but it is steadily coming down as, which is nice. And, about 5 gallons for, 3,000 square foot house, so.
Okay. Yeah. Not too bad. Any other expenses that we might have missed that are pretty common?
Something that landscaping is one. It's not significant for me on landscaping, but one thing that I have chosen to provide that I wrestled with for a while is firewood for the fire pit. Usually in these rural markets, there's a local that's their business model, and that's what he does every day, and they will gladly bring it to your place and stack it for you. Sometimes it's by the truckload. Sometimes it's, they put you on an auto refill, kind of like the propane, they'll just come by once every few weeks. And I was super nervous about providing it at first because I thought people would abuse it and just, it would be a ridiculous expense. But I've come to find out that it's truly worth it because I get asked that all the time. And I feel like I probably get bookings. I have more than paid for a few deliveries of firewood by having 2 extra bookings a month than by not providing it. So when I can say yes to that question, people almost always book instantly. So it's a $40 to $60 every 30-ish days. It's not anything that's super expensive, but You'll more in every one of these small towns in the Southeast, you'll find a local firewood guy that is, mine is
All
actually,
over.
he's on my street actually. So, I mean, he literally could bring it with a wheelbarrow or a side by side and bring it to my cabin.
Yeah.
And he also is a set of eyes on my cabin too, which is another benefit, which is nice. But I think it's worth providing that, even though it is an extra expense. You might could easily say, sorry, you can find your own. It seems to be worth it to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. And up here, I don't think there's been a short-term rental I've seen yet without a fire pit. So it is a very popular thing and something. And you do have the option of doing a propane fire pit. It just depends on where you locate it at, but that's absolutely correct. Firewood is, and you always have somebody like down on the corner, they're selling produce and firewood. So,
that's right. Yep.
But yeah, landscaping was another one, Avery.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about that.
Average, I don't really have a figure on this because it depends on how big it is, what all stuff you want done to it. Typical lot size up here is about an acre. We don't have a lot of cookie cutter neighborhoods. So sometimes you're weed eating on the side of a really steep incline, and it really, there's a lot of factors that go into that. And landscaping, though, in the summer, things grow like crazy here. So once the spring gets here, everything grows. So we're very humid, very, very fertile land up here. So you're gonna need to put some aside for that landscaping. So
most of mine are in a more, like in the middle of trees and forest setting. So I don't have any manicured grass or anything like that. But what I mentioned earlier in the preventing the weeds growing up through that's my landscaping. So that has to be done typically 2 to 3 times a year, and clean it out and spray it with Roundup or whatever it is that they spray on it. That's usually about all I have as far as landscape. Sometimes I have to redo the pine straw or the gravel in the driveway, but that's pretty rare. It's a every other year type thing, not every couple of months.
Yeah, and that is definitely an expense because there's a lot of places up here that are gravel roads, and it's about
$700 a truckload to bring it.
Yeah, like $40, $50 a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not horrible. But you don't definitely don't have to do it like all the time. But it depends on how deep you go and how, whatnot. 1 ton will cover up to about 80 to 100 square feet. So pea gravel anyway. I always recommend putting that big gravel down first and just rolling over it until you smash it all down, and then coming back over that with pea gravel. It'll save you a lot of gravel in the long run.
Yep. Good to know. I didn't know that. All right. Anything else? Because I've said, do we have anything else twice? And we keep coming up with more stuff.
I've got one more.
Okay.
And this is just a recommendation of mine because we are humid up here. It plays havoc on wood. You'll see a lot of checking on log cabins. Don't let that alarm you. It happens up here. It's just a thing. You can't get away from it. If it becomes too severe, you throw some resin or something in it to like offset that. But it might behoove you to stain your cabin every few years or something. And right now stain is about $50 to $110 a gallon, and the labor is about $1.30 per square foot to have that done. So on a 2,000 square foot house, you're probably looking at about $2,600 to get your entire cabin stained and winterized and everything. And it's just always a good idea if you're in a true log cabin or even faux log cabin, keep that wood nice because it will rot and fall off, and it's a lot cheaper to maintain it rather than having to replace it. And if it's a true log cabin, that can be ugly if a beam or something rots and it supports the house. So
one other expense that I have that I do voluntarily, but it needs to be done, is pressure washing decks and
yes.
Around like the outdoor grill, and it just gets nasty after. I do that once a year, typically about this time of year. And also in the fall, having leaves cleaned out of gutters. You have trees around you typically on cabins, and leaves fall like crazy because it's not all pine trees around you. So you typically have to have driveways blown off, and also have the gutters cleaned out. So that's, again, not a year-round thing, but I would say from Middle of October until the middle of December. That's an expense, for those 60 days. Every 2 weeks or so, you need to have somebody come clean or have my handyman will do it. He just bills me a flat charge, usually $100 to $200 per time. So It's definitely there.
Yeah. And that
if you don't do it, you'll regret it. Kind of like what Jay was saying about the staining. If you can get away with not doing it, but you will
eventually.
Yeah. If you don't clean off the driveway, the leaves will freeze and somebody will slide down the driveway. And if you don't clean off the roof, it's going to eventually cave in the roof. And it just looks terrible too. So it's more a presentation. It's as much presentation as it is maintenance. But
and
I've had people slide down my driveway in the leaves just from it being wet, like not even frozen. Yeah. So you do have to keep that blown off for sure.
Yeah, that was my segue from like the staining too. You don't want to have debris and stuff on your deck because we do get snow up here, and you don't want that snow to be on top of all that stuff. You're just gonna have, because decks have shelf lives up here. They really do before they need maintenance. I mean, typically a deck only has like a 9-year lifespan until you need to maintain it. But the more that you can do, like a weathering or something that repels water on your deck, come and put that sealant on your deck is always a good idea. Take care of it. And then the roof, you can't avoid this up here. You're gonna have moss on your roof. It happens, and eventually that'll eat through your shingles, cause holes. So you kind of want to go up there, maybe once a year or right after the summer months, and just kind of scrape all that stuff off there, or just look at it case by case. But you want to keep that roof clean of debris. It's just going to last longer. Also commonly now we're starting to see a lot of metal roofs too, but I'm talking about shingle roofs. I don't think moss on a metal roof is really going to hurt it all that bad, but like it would a shingle roof. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. I don't know. Will moss grow on a metal roof?
It could. I don't see why not. Moss grows everywhere up here.
I'm not a moss specialist, but regardless, take care of your roof.
And moss is good if you can get your lawn to be just moss. You don't have to cut it ever. It doesn't grow. It's soft on your feet, or clover or something. So those are very popular lawns up here too, rather than grass. So
good to know.
A lot less maintenance too. So.
All right. Anything else? So we've gone over landscaping, taking care of the exterior, insurance, utilities. Anything else we're missing?
Nothing I can think of right now, but I probably might think of something when we leave.
That's fine. We can add something in later if we need to before it airs.
It's like going to the grocery store.
All right. Well, cool, guys. Thank you so much for coming on. And y'all, if you want to buy a property with Jay and go axe throwing in Western North Carolina, email agents@theshorttermshop.com. We'll get you connected. Or if you guys just have more questions, every Thursday we have what we call an open office hours, and you can sign up for that at strquestions.com. Thanks, everyone.